welcome. How's the sound in the back there? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Welcome family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues of my mom. I am Jane Hall Taylor, her oldest daughter. We are gathered at this beautiful farm setting here to celebrate the life of our mother, Barbara Hall. This southern Wisconsin countryside is where her deep family roots lie, and they shaped her life. When we asked her last year what she would suggest that we do to honor her after she passed, she said, "Don't make too much of a fuss." And hold it in Wisconsin if possible to make it easy for family and friends to attend. She would have loved this place. Yeah. We are so touched by those of you that have traveled from near and far to join us this afternoon, but we are also saddened by the absence of Mom's sister, Catherine Knockery, who passed away on December 13th, and her sister, Marilyn Craig in Illinois, who's unable to travel. And we think about Mom's Aunt Beulah Leakey, who passed away on November 15th at the amazing age of 102 in Riverside, California. Beulah was the last of the 10 Burnau siblings. While the proverbial family tree has lost these stalwart branches, we see the descendants of all of them and all of you here. After our formal speakers, we will have an open mic if you would like to share a brief story or memory. So I'm just giving you a bit of lead time to think about it. I would now like to introduce my niece, Susan Grace Hansen, and they will do a reading.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, this is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer. Life unfolds in a growing spiral as children begin their own paths and mothers, rich with knowledge and experience, have a new task set before them. Our strengths turn now to a circle wider than our own children, to the well-being of the community. The net stretches larger and larger. The circle bends round again, and grandmothers walk the way of the teacher, becoming models for younger women to follow. And in the fullness of age, our work is not yet done. The spiral widens farther and farther, so that the sphere of a wise woman is beyond herself, beyond her family, beyond the human community, embracing the planet and mothering the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. My sister, Catherine Hall, will now give the eulogy.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, everybody. I'm Barbara Hall's daughter, Catherine. And like Jane said, Mom didn't leave us with very clear instructions on how to memorialize her. She was really more concerned for all of you to make it easy for you to attend whatever we did in her memory. And that's a lot of who she was in life. She really defined her role in life by her relationships, by who she loved and also who she served, not seeing herself as the actor, but as the facilitator and the support. And so we're going to give you a little bit of a feeling for who she was in life without overly praising her, or she would not have approved. So first, we picked this space. The moment we walked in, we felt her presence in this beautiful room with the soaring timbers, the silence, the light, the smell of good wood, and the beauty of heartwood that gives structure to a barn that has served people, families, and a community for generations. And the location, in an area of southeastern Wisconsin that has given a home to Mom's family for generations. Many times in recent years, we've driven through this area with Mom reminiscing about family farms long past of Moores and Cools and Burnos who've lived in this area since coming over from the old country in the middle of the 19th century. And Mom would have loved this space She would think of it as a wonderful space to have an occasion for somebody else. So, as it happens, though, our family has a time-honored tradition, and it might be the same in your family, but you can say just about anything as long as you preface it by saying, "Don't tell so-and-so." So, I'm going to tell you a few things, but don't tell Mom, okay? Because she, again, wouldn't approve of this space, this occasion, all of this honoring her. We're so pleased to see you all today. Really, from the bottom of our hearts, we feel grateful that you joined us here to celebrate Mom's life. And after recognizing that the space feels like her, the second thing we can do is talk about what was important to her, because that won't be too direct either. So, much like the beautiful setting that we're in with the river, the forest, the farm, the elegant structure, what gives this space meaning is the purpose we put it to, the usefulness to others, and the community that it creates. And that, in a nutshell, was Mom. Never seeing herself in isolation, always in relation to other people and to her community. In celebrating the community that she formed a part of and helped create, I may cover a few things that some of you here know very well, and it might be news for others of you who know her from other parts of her life. Mom was born not too far from here in a third-floor bedroom of the hotel in Mukwonago that was owned by her grandparents. Her own family lived next door in rooms attached to a gas station owned by her parents. It was not fancy. Some might describe it now as downright hardscrabble. But in 1933, in the heart of the Great Depression, nobody had much money. But I have never heard her reflect on the difficulties of that time and complain about lack. She spoke instead of the wealth of family that surrounded her and her sisters, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, and literally dozens of cousins who created a web of support for her growing up. One set of parents didn't need to do it all alone, and if the spirit of that time reflects in Mom's character, when a need arose with family, the question was not, should I help? But instead, it was more, what is needed? Because of course you would help. And Mom, she loved her sisters, cherished her older sister, Marilyn. Marilyn, with her many accomplishments in life, inspired her to go further. From early days when they decided to walk to the family farm from Mukwonago without really knowing how far it was. And as their spirits flagged, Marilyn would keep telling her, "I'm sure it's just over the next hill, Barbara. It's just a little bit further." To later in life, when Mom was contemplating 2 literacy jobs that were possibilities, one that would have her be the leader and the other more of the support staff. Marilyn encouraged her to go after, and she got, the leadership position, because of course she could do it. And as we were cleaning out Mom's desk, we found sheafs of notes from books she read and talks she had attended about dementia. She wanted to do everything that she could to support her sister as she traveled roads we could not fathom on a journey that we could not follow. And every time we drove by Lake Forest Place, where Marilyn lives in later years, Mom would whisper, "It's just a little bit further, Marilyn. I'm sure it's just over that next hill." So Sister Catherine and Mom had a very different relationship, a little bit more like cohorts in crime, and a lot of hilarity. From their early days in the gas station, getting up to mischief, like dropping lit matches down the gas tanks under the station. We could have blown up the whole town of Mukwonago. But they wanted to watch them blow out as the match went down the gas from the cold air that was rushing up off the colder gasoline below. And right up to their last visits together, they would just have the best old times telling stories and laughing and joking together. And I'm sure it doesn't surprise any of us that they passed within a few weeks of each other. It's almost like Mom departed with a quick, "See you on the other side, Catherine," before she walked through that door. With Sister Vivian, Mom marveled at what for her was the mystery of Vivian's relentless energy levels. Her cheery, outgoing nature and irrepressible enthusiasm, and her many accomplishments and the accomplishments of her children. And Vivian will speak in a bit, we hope. Many times in later years, she'd reflect on how far they'd all come, the entire family, from their early beginnings in and near Mukwonago. And she didn't credit these accomplishments to personal grit or to talent, more because extended families supported each other. The idea that we are part of a community greater than ourselves. That was Mom. I talked just a minute about roots and wings. There was no better expression of Mom's form of love than her relationship with my dad. He was a genius, up-and-coming archaeologist and cultural anthropologist. She, an anthropologist and social scientist in her own right. In the 54 years of their marriage, she supported his dreams and ambitions and provided the anchor, support, and family life he could only have dreamed of. On their own, they could have been fine. Together, they really transcended all expectations. And there's something about roots like these that give you wings. They prove this again and again. My dad, as a relatively new professor of archaeology, had summer schools he had to teach. And while he had the curriculum down, the logistics was a bit of a mystery to him. He relied on Mom to organize the living relationships and arrangements for dozens of students, whether it be in tent cities or aged farmhouses. She just figured it out. She established cooking schedules and routines to make sure everybody got fed, and she raised 4 children in the field as well, like it was just what one did. She would quip that it was never a problem having children at the digs, because if we were good, we got to help out with the archaeology and maybe learn something while we were doing it. And if we were naughty, she just put us all in separate pits until we calmed down. So she really understood how his mind worked too. So she also planned the most fascinating family vacations around quests for him. Not for us, the family vacation to Disney, not once, but we went on these amazing adventures across the country, like the time we traveled for weeks to get to the archaeological site on the farthest west point of the continental United States, stopping to visit distant second and third cousins of my dad's along the way, or driving up to mysterious medicine wheel circle on a windswept mountain in Wyoming. Right in line with her own and her family's migration from small-town Wisconsin across a bigger world, she wholeheartedly supported her own children in doing the same, endorsing Jane moving to California immediately after college graduation and supporting her in every way, never telling us until literally 40 years later that after driving out to visit her for the first time 6 months after Jane moved, she cried halfway across the country on the way back, realizing her oldest child had found her place in the world. And she wouldn't be returning home. She supported each of her daughters and grandchildren in exploring an education and developing a life and a place in the world that was uniquely theirs. The delight in seeing each one of us fly free outweighed the sadness at how far we might fly. And if there happened to be a road trip involved in getting one of us to where we were going, she was all in. I wouldn't say that expeditions like these were strictly selfless service. I've never seen anybody happier to go on a road trip who wasn't an actual Labrador retriever. Mom just loved a road trip. Had a map on her lap, the newspaper to read, and she could be happy anywhere in the world. Martha and Susan and I saw this in action and the grandkids during multiple cross-country rail trips. Many are the times also she drove Susan or myself across the country to help us move. But we're on to you, Mom. It was really the lure of the open road. And then the last big trip was really in character for her. I asked Mom in 2017 if there was any bucket list trip she wanted to take, not really knowing what she'd suggest, but that is how we ended up a year later on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. At 85 years old, she hiked across the mountains of northern Spain on this quest of her own she'd been longing to take. We were with a much younger group, and every single one of them by the end had come up to her to say, I want to be just like you when I'm 85. Never once did she complain it was too hard. She got up every morning, she tackled the trail. Being out of doors in the sun, the wind, and the rain, she was all in, full on joy. I too want to be like her if I should be so blessed as to make it to 85. So thanks for the lessons, Mom, about putting community and family and service at the heart of all things. Thanks for the brilliant examples. Thanks for being the roots to all of our wings. But now comes the hardest part. How do you let go of somebody who never let go of anyone or anything in her life? Each one of you in this room is here because she valued you in a unique way. She was not an expressive or outgoing person, and you may even think she didn't know you that well, but I promise you she thought deeply about each one of you and your life, and she cared for your welfare. So I would encourage you, in closing, to reflect on Barbara's life and to go out into the world thinking about how you could take a little bit of her with you. The unconditional support, the sense of community, the unfailing positivity that had her taking life as it came, that gives her life by thinking of these things, that gives her life transcendence and carries on her spirit. And may God bless you on your journey, Mom.
I hope I make it to 85 too. Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Mom's grandchildren, Emma and Abby Taylor, my daughters, will now share a remembrance together.
Hi, everyone. Growing up, we always wondered why our mom was so supportive of alternative careers and lifestyles when that went against everything we were told and saw growing up in a society with such high pressure and no plans to follow the norm of what success is commonly defined as. As you get older, you start to see your relatives more as mentors and friends as opposed to parental figures who are in charge. As kids, we saw Grandma mostly as someone who would spend hours on the ground with us playing tiddlywinks. And in my teenage years, someone who got mad when you keep your sister and cousin up till 3 a.m, secretly repainting your bedroom wall in an attempt to turn said wall into a ski slope.
When Emma and I got older, we started to get to know Grandma as a person. For me, that was when I was reaching the end of high school, and it was before my graduation party. Then I went inside the kitchen and Grandma was helping make preparations for the party. She explained to me how with my mom being the main hostess, there would be a few details that would get forgotten. So she was quietly attending to all the small tasks, things like ensuring there were napkins in easy reach for our friends, and everything small that might get forgotten. And it was Grandma's quiet attention to detail and thoughtfulness that I began to notice as I got older, always thinking of the people she cared about in her actions.
For me, it would have been during college when Woolly began, a club I founded to begin to bridge the gender divide in outdoor spaces, and I began to turn my passion into a mission to help other people. Grandma lit up when she heard this idea, boasting of how awesome she thought it was. At my graduation, when I nervously told her about how I'd be taking Woolly's mission a step further through the job I'd be going to, moving to the woods of North Carolina to teach students how to survive in the mountains, but how the challenges in the mountains really aren't that different from the challenges in their normal lives. And I'd be making $100 a day, and I'd be out of work in November. I looked up, anxiously waiting for her reaction, and with light in her eyes, she said, "You're changing lives. That's the only job that matters." And that was the moment it all clicked for me.
All she wanted was for us to live a life geared towards helping others. To her, success didn't mean a fancy salary or going to a prestigious university. To her, success was putting love into the world, and it didn't matter what corner of it you chose. It makes sense now why Mom demonstrated such support for us. Leading with love was a lesson that Grandma taught to her children, what her children taught to their children, and it's a lesson that we will teach to ours. We know that her legacy will continue on long past her lifetime.
We invite you to raise a glass to the legacy of Barbara Hall. To Barbara!
Thank you, girls. Mom's grandson, Ian Hansen, will now share a remembrance.
My grandma gave me a lot of things, from her time to her wisdom, and all my favorite memories, including being in the basement during a holiday party, seeking refuge from all the adult talk upstairs, and going down to the basement and looking through all the tools. And she would go down and explain to me what all the tools did. And when I was younger, I would think, oh, she just wants to make sure I'm not going to cut off my arm or break anything. But now I realize it was her giving me the time that I needed to just spend with her and feel company without the talk being of things I didn't understand. And also gave her time to have a break from all the talk that I know sometimes she didn't want to hear. And so I just want to take this to thank her for all that.
Thank you, Ian. We now welcome anyone else in the audience that would like to share a brief memory or story or thought of Barbara. Please start with your name and how you know her. And are you gonna come up, Aunt Vivian?
It's going to be difficult. Thank you. I'm sorry to turn this into a weep session, but you know, being the youngest of 4 daughters, growing up in a gas station in Wisconsin, there are so many memories of growing up in the gas station with 4 sisters. I have to credit my sister Marilyn, the oldest sister who can't be with us, for setting the bar really high. And it goes back generations. I think of my dad growing up in a hotel with people waiting on him all the time. And when he married my mother, of course, he expected the same thing. My mother never put salt on the table. I don't have anything prepared, by the way. My mother never put salt on the table because she said, I salted it. So every day, Mother would put the salt back on the table because Dad wanted more salt. Her mother-in-law, who lived next door, was a marvelous grandmother to us, would come over and at usually lunchtime, because we had our dinner at noon rather than the evening, and Louisa would say, well, Mother first would say, well, would you like something? And Grandma would say, no, no. But that looks very good. So that's the way I grew up. Coming home from school one day, there's a hobo sitting at the table, and Mother had fixed him a nice plate, because that's what my mother did. These are the ways, these are the things my sisters and I grew up with, and they're all gone. So I am sorry to do this, but you know, the memories of growing up together. I'm the last one with them to share. And so I hope that our grandchildren know that their parents, me and my 3 sisters, all came from what a lot of, as was it Catherine said, that we would consider pretty hard scrabble type growing up, but we never felt that way. We never felt that way. My parents never made us feel poor. We always had enough. And one day I said to Mother, I need another dress. And Mother said, being one of 12 children, I had one dress for Sunday school and one dress to go to school. It brings things back to the real fundamentals in life. These are some of the stories that are going to be lost once I'm gone. But Barbara did her very, very best because she kept a lot of files.
Never let go of anything.
She never let go of anything. I have a cast iron Dutch oven at home because I went to visit Barbara. She was still trying to, this was years after my mother passed away, she was still trying to get rid of some of Mother's things. They were too precious to just give away. So the Dutch oven I said, Barbara, I've been looking for a Dutch oven. Oh, I have one. I will remember that it's hardly, I can barely lift it at this point. But I think of Mother and I think of Barbara every time that happened. I have to tell you, my sister Marilyn bought my first suit. My sister Barbara, when I entered the University of Wisconsin, by the way, I did not finish there, but she got me involved with the UN, which is a big, it was such an interest of Barbara's, and got me interested in the Integrated Liberal Studies, which was a new program that year. And my dormitory that Barbara arranged was the first co-op women's dorm at the University of Wisconsin campus. As of this year, it's now a hole in the ground. I did finish at the University of Iowa with my master's degree. So I did get along with did some things, but Catherine was a marvel in my life. Did you know that Catherine did, and this can't die with me, so many things, memories will, but Catherine was the first scorekeeper of Tiger Woods for his first professional tournament. And she told Tiger Woods' father he could not go on the golf course. So I do have wonderful memories of all 4 of my sisters. And some of those memories will go with me, but you each have that packet to my cousins to take home that Barbara saved from my mother. And I want to tell you how much it means to me to have such a wonderful occasion for Barbara to be remembered, because we also remember Marilyn and Catherine.
Thank you, Aunt Vivian. Cousin Susan Guernsey. Susan is the oldest cousin of all of us. I haven't seen her in a very long time.
Yes, Susan Guernsey, and I'm delighted to be here today to I'm delighted to be here today to remember Aunt Barbara. She was a special lady, and I always felt lucky to call her my aunt. Until now, she has always been in my life. These past 2 months has given me pause to think back on so many memories I have of Aunt Barbara, and I would like to share a few with you. I met Aunt Barbara before I can even remember. Being the firstborn grandchild, niece, of course, my great-grandpa and great-grandma Moore, my grandpa Moore, and my Aunt Barbara came to visit me in Virginia when I was just 5 months old. I do believe probably Aunt Barbara drove them all out there. I do have pictures to prove it. But some of my earliest memories of Aunt Barbara was once she had taken a job in Chicago with the Housing Authority. And we went to visit her in, I don't know if it was her first apartment, but her first apartment in Chicago. And it must have been a studio, but she had a Murphy bed. And I was absolutely amazed that here was this bed that folded out of the wall and somebody was going to sleep on that. And I had to pull out my baby book, or photograph album, that my mother started for me, and she had one she started for Paul. I don't think she ever got to them for Barbara and Mark. Because I wanted to be precise with some things. But Aunt Barbara in 1957 brought her new boyfriend to meet the Craigs. There were 5 of us at the time, and one of them being only 2 months old. And Uncle Bob sat with me and did Play-Doh and made some of the most intricate creations you can ever imagine. After Aunt Barbara and Uncle Bob were married, settled in Springfield, and started a family, we visited them a few times. But because I was the oldest, I got to visit by myself. After Thanksgiving in 1962, I was 8 years old. Aunt Barbara asked my mother if I could ride with her back from Wisconsin or Illinois to Springfield to help take care of Jane in the back. So she had laid the little station wagon down, the back seat down. Jane was just put there, no car seat, never heard of anything. And I, the 8-year-old, was in charge of, as we drove back to Springfield at night. That trip, I was then put on a train to come back to Chicago at 8. Come back to Chicago, and Uncle Bob took me on the train, and the train left before he got off. So then Aunt Barbara had to drive to the next station, and we saw her holding Jane, so Uncle Bob could get off and go back home to Springfield. After Catherine came along, I visited by myself again, and I was 10. And I was allowed to go back and forth from the house they lived in to the State Museum where Uncle Bob was. I had to cross a busy street. I went back and forth multiple times a day into this big building. But also on that trip, Aunt Barbara sat me down with one of Uncle Bob's scholarly papers, and she read to me, and I had to make sure what she was reading to me was exactly right, spelled correctly and all. At 10. And then about 1968, the Halls moved to Libertyville. We saw them often. Jane, Catherine, Martha, and Susan were our younger cousins, but we certainly enjoyed seeing them. We spent a lot of holidays together, some at our house, always Easter in Libertyville. We had summer picnics, we had lots of different things. And then I grew up, went to college, got married, moved away. Whenever I was back in Deerfield, every effort was made to visit Aunt Barbara and the Halls. Memories from this time, one time she called up and invited my family with my 3 children. She didn't invite my mom and dad to go to a powwow. Don't remember where it was, but it was fascinating. My children to this day do remember it. They came to Connecticut whenever Margaret, my oldest, was in college. Margaret showed them, Aunt Barbara wanted to go, they wanted to go by themselves, which was fine with me. And Margaret showed them around her new university, also taking them to the library so they could check to see if Uncle Bob's book was actually, it was. We've been fortunate that Aunt Barbara attended all of their weddings, only the first one with Uncle Bob. Aunt Barbara always took a special interest in all of her family. She kept up to date, usually through her sisters, of what everyone was up to. Over the years, when I came to visit or was calling on the phone, she was such a wonderful conversationalist, updating me on family, hers and others. What was keeping her busy, what she was reading, and just observations of the world we all live in. As my mother has failed in the last few years, I always knew that Aunt Barbara was a phone call away. I missed the conversations with my mother, but Aunt Barbara filled that void because she knew my history was an integral part of my life, even if I didn't see her often in my adult life. And we had wonderful conversations, catching up and reminiscing. I will miss those conversations and visits. And as my dad used to say, weddings and funerals is a great time to bring families together. We are all sad to see Aunt Barbara and Aunt Catherine die so close together, but the memories sustain us, and gathering together to remember keeps us connected. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to share a little thought or memory or story? And
I was going to wait for someone else to go first.
watch the wire.
Hi. I've got to look. Hold on a second.
Glasses.
There we go. No. I had always wanted to come and speak, and just because Aunt Barbara was so special to me, and getting some thoughts together. Hopefully, I won't ramble. I tend to be rather emotional, and I'm kind of sappy, so please forgive me. And Aunt Vivian, she did give me, I think it was last fall when I was visiting her over Labor Day. She said, "Mark, I got a dresser from the hotel. It would fit so good in your house. Would you like it?" So it's in the back of my car right now. So I too have some of the stuff that Aunt Barbara's been saving. And there's a lot of stuff in the house that she's still saving. But I had kind of a theme of what I wanted to say, because Aunt Barbara was my cool aunt. And I'm thinking about, why was she a cool aunt? And in reflection, it's not that she was a cool aunt, it was all the Moore girls were cool aunts. Because they were all very active listeners. And they would always listen to everything you said and remember it and make you feel important as a kid. So, she was a cool aunt, she really was. But I think proximity to us made her that much closer, because she was 10 miles away and I'd ride my bike up there, or 13 miles I think it was, so Louisville. And I'd ride my bike up there, stop there, say hello, have conversations, and it was really great. And the girls were like our younger sisters, because they all grew up and they were all at least 4 years younger than us. I can't
He's
remember.
just like younger sisters.
And they were like our little sisters. So, we didn't argue with them. We just played with them. They were these innocent little kids. But like Susan, though, I did experience some questionable parenting from my mom. Because my mom, at 8, just stuck me on a train going down to Springfield. And I got down there, visited with Uncle Bob and Aunt Barbara. And I had a nice time. And my cool Aunt Barbara, she had a whole room there filled with shards of pottery. And it was like a puzzle. She was gluing these pots and various antiquities back together as part of the archaeological findings that they had picked up over time. It was so cool. And I still don't really remember if it was Susan or me, but I've heard that story so many times about Uncle Bob being on there. But Aunt Barbara, Susan says, she was very supportive of him. I say she put up with him. Because she put up with he was a character, an absent-minded character, and she managed to keep things together, which was really great. I don't know if it was on that trip or it was a trip that we were going through Springfield on, where we got the infamous picture of Catherine, and this is the greatest picture of all time, Jane and Catherine in a wagon. And I don't know if it was Aunt Barbara or Uncle Bob placed them in the wagon, and had been sitting in the sun all day. You got Jane sitting there, and Catherine's getting up, screaming, and the picture was taken. It was great.
I think it's me and Jody.
No, it was you and Jane.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Let's go back to the picture.
That is infamous.
And yeah, Susan may call it supporting the brilliant Robert Hall, which in grade school, when we were asked who was the smartest person you know, I put on Robert Hall because he was the smartest person I know. Paul, forgive me for that, wherever you are. Not you, Paul. I heard your laugh. But she would put up with all the various things that Uncle Bob had done. And we've heard stories with that, putting up with him putting someone on a train and forgetting to get off. And the one story that was really kind of funny, I always talk about, the girls go on these dates to Cahokia, and the time, she tells me, when he pulled a trailer into the canopy of a motel and took the canopy out. And she said the students were placing bets on whether he was going to do it. The absent-minded Robert Hall. But she was always so engaging. And there was one time, we were having a conversation, and she was reflecting on her time working at the CTA, or Chicago Housing Authority, I'm sorry. And she said, I was on this tour of this new place. They were calling it Cabrini Green. And it was this forward-looking way of building housing projects. And she looked around and she said to me, I don't think people like living here. And fortunately, 40 years later, the Housing Authority realized her wisdom and they tore them down because they were not the best thing in the world. And she realized it there as a young kid right out of college. Aunt Barbara was alert, perceptive. I'm going to read a little bit of this stuff, but most of my things I know. But she was alert, perceptive, and insightful in her final days. I'm so happy to have visited her a number of times. And even then, she and Em and I were out to lunch and Jane at Lamb's Farm, and she told me a story about my mom and how my mom had asked Barbara to lend her $20 because she was going to elope with this man named Raymond in Mississippi, and she never paid her back. I didn't offer anything, money to her, but it was kind of fun. And Mom had gone to, after Mom had gone to Lake Forest, we'd have nice visits at her house. And it was just so fun to talk to her because she was so engaging. Aunt Vivian, same thing. You're always listening to what I say and you remember what I say. It was a more thing. But she's so engaging and asked my opinion on things. I think we talked about education and what's the biggest challenge of education. It's just always aware of the what's going on, plus feeling the right compassion to us, having a mother that was, declining. But I have the belief that we're all really immortal through the people that we touch and live with. And I think all the people being here is testament that how Barbara will be immortalized for now going forward. So, and thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you, Mark. It was fun to see that antique go out the door, and Mom was so excited. She just loved antiques. Does anybody else want to be brave?
Speak real quick. I hope. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Donna Price. I'm Grace's daughter, which is,
Mom's cousin.
yeah.
One of dozens of
That's
cousins.
it. Thanks everybody for sharing, and I want to remember the husbands of the girls too, right? Because I'm so glad that Emma and Abby shared the sparkly eyes and sharing love. Because that's what they did, all of them, and their children. So my memory is I didn't get to have enough time for those poor daughters, but we still have Vivian. We still hold Marilyn in our hearts. And so glad to see all of you guys here. What an amazing tribute. But so my mom always told the story about the train at Dot's house, and Bob would say, it's the highlight of the day. And we have the same train that goes by our house because we're near there. And every morning, it's really without fail, I remember Bob and Barbara. And it's the highlight of the day. So, thanks so much. What a beautiful tribute to your mom.
Thank you, Donna.
Anybody else? Friends, neighbors, colleagues? It's okay. You do.
Yeah.
Oh.
Margaret.
Watch the cord. Oh, okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Just
right there? Okay. Hi, I'm Margaret Biggins. And I can't say I ever remember meeting Barbara because, or Mrs. Hall as I used to call her, because she was always just a part of my life. Susan and I, oh my gosh, stop. Susan and I have been friends since we were like one-year-olds about.
6 months.
My family lived next door. My family lived next door to the Halls. My parents bought the house on Bartlett Terrace in 1968, November, when I was 9 months old, and the Halls moved in shortly after that, so Susan was about a year. And we so I can't really say I remember meeting Mrs. Hall or Susan. They've just always been, or the Halls, because they've always been part of my life. And I looked as Susan is always, she's been a great friend, but she's almost like, a sister, and Mrs. Hall was like a second mom to me. And the Halls are just this amazing extended family. And I don't think when I was little, or a kid, that I realized how lucky I was to have it that way. Looking back through the years of my childhood, I realize now that living next to them was truly special. I spent a lot of time playing at their house, and it was a home of like creativity and exploration. And whether it was playing in their backyard, making a fort with giant army green canvases draped over the jungle gym, or making mud pies in the sandbox, or dressing up in costumes and putting on skits in their basement with a makeshift stage. It was just like a really great place to be a kid. And they were just, and there were many teaching moments through the years too, like when Mrs. Hall caught Susan and I drinking out of the sump pump in the front yard, and she told us that that's not a good idea. She was a little freaked out. Or the time I was over there, and I was so proud because my mom told me I could stay out and play Ghosts in the Graveyard till it was pitch black outside. And this I just remember Martha and Jane, I think it was, and Catherine kind of laughing like, what? What'd you say? And I was like, pitch black. I can see it was pitch black. And Mrs. Hall was like, it's pitch black in a very kind way. She never made me feel bad or stupid, but anyway, I could go on and on with like stories and little memories like that, but I just want to wrap it up by saying, like, when I think of Mrs. Hall, I think of just what a great mom she was, and you know, she raised 4 incredible human beings, and gave me a lifelong friend in Susan, and yeah, she was just incredible, and that's about it. Thank you.
Test. I think, Margaret, you're the farthest traveled person from Seattle area. And the stories keep coming out that Susan shares of the shenanigans you guys got into. I cannot even. I was the oldest, so I was like straight as an arrow. Right. Anybody else? We can wrap it up and you can share one-on-one with each other. Thank you all so much for sharing your treasured memories with us, and may these shared memories stay with you as long after you leave here and go on to live your lives without Mom. Mom will be interned at the beautiful Oak Ridge Cemetery in East Troy, next to our dad, Robert Hall, who passed in 2012. Generations of Moore and Berna family relatives are buried there. Please stay and visit. We've got food in the back, and we've got an open bar and more coffee and tea. And
Don't tell Mom there was a bar open.
don't tell Mom there was an open bar. We debated that. Okay, my cousins. We're going to have a cousin photo in the room around the corner with the party lights right after this. And